You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org. This episode of Pizza Quest is brought to you by Central Milling. Hand-selected grain, expertly milled for passionate bakers. Visit centralmilling.com to learn more. I'm Peter Reinhardt. Welcome to Pizza Quest. And today, a special Pizza Quest because we've got one of my favorite people, one of my favorite guests, Meathead Goldwyn, rejoins us on Pizza Quest. And we're going to talk about everything that has to do with, his topic, meat, grilling, barbecue. He's the author of Meathead, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, best-selling book, really the go-to. It's everything you want to know. The host of AmazingRibs.com, where, by the way, Meathead, I'm amazed at how much free information you give away on that site. That's awesome. But welcome back to Pizza Quest, because before we get into all the grilling and barbecue, I want to talk with you a little bit about pizza. We'll talk about, we'll touch on how to do pizza on the grill and what makes that pizza on the grill different from grilled pizza. So welcome.
Show me a barbecue lover and I'll show you a pizza lover.
You got it. All right. And before we even do that, before we get into all that, for those folks who have, the very few that are left that don't know who you are or have not found AmazingRibs.com or don't know your background, could you give us kind of a little short capsule of how you ended up getting into being the guy, the most trusted source on all things grilling, barbecue, in the world? How did it happen? And how did you become Meathead?
Well, it was a dark and stormy night.
Yeah.
I became Meathead. Funny you ask. I'm an old fart, and my dad and I used to sit and watch Archie Bunker, which was a very political sitcom in the 60s and 70s. And Archie was a bigot, and his son was a flaming liberal. And my dad and I were on different sides of the fence about Vietnam, but he wasn't a bigot. And I used to jokingly call him Archie, and he'd call me Meathead, which is what Archie called his son-in-law. Actually, it wasn't his son; his son-in-law. And and his son-in-law was played by Rob Reiner, who is a flaming liberal.
There's probably a few people. There's probably a small percentage of people who know what we're talking about right now. Many people, maybe, if you haven't ever seen All in the Family, get it on your streaming channels. Is one of the greatest.
So Dad used to call me Meathead. And when I got into barbecue back in the 90s, I ran the food and drink section of AOL in the 90s.
No kidding.
And I was in the wine world. I was the wine critic for the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune, and I ran AOL's food and drink section. And you needed a handle, so I was Meathead naturally, and it stuck.
It all worked.
And, the only ones who don't call me Meathead are my mother and my sister and my wife. And my wife has a few other choice names for me.
Yeah, right.
But I built AmazingRibs.com back in 2005 or so, and it rapidly became the most popular barbecue and grilling site on the internet, and Google fell in love with it, and it took off, and it became my day job within 4 or 5 years, and now it's by far, we have over 2,000 pages, as you said, of free content. Plus, we have a Pitmaster Club, which is a membership portion with over 16,000 members. It's the largest barbecue association in the world. And and we have a pizza section. It's nothing like what Peter and the serious pizza people do. But early on, I started trying to grill pizza. Yeah. And I wanted to write about it. And, of course, that's how I met Peter. Although, actually, I think we met virtually about pizza, but we met firsthand at a book signing in Georgia somewhere.
In Decatur, Georgia, and we were doing a demo on the barbecue side and grilling, and I was doing one for a new book. I think it was my pizza book, and we hit it off, and we've been friends. And you've been interviewed on Pizza Quest before, and we keep running into each other and
we share many friends. Bridget Binns is a good friend. In fact, I'm working on a new book, and Bridget is helping on it. So she sends her love.
Well, thank you. Yes, I love her, and of course we've gone out together to eat in Chicago. When I'm in Chicago, you're based in Chicago. For those who don't know that,
right. And everybody out there, guess where we went to eat? Pizza? No. Barbecue? No.
No,
Ethiopian.
Ethiopian, right? Why not, right?
Well, it was
Neutral
fun.
ground, yeah. But it was a great meal. Well, listen, I got it. So you mentioned pizza. You got a pizza section on the site. By the way, I'm wearing today. I've broken with the tradition today for the first time in the history of Pizza Quest. I am wearing a different T-shirt other than the Pizza Quest shirt. I'm wearing one that says Dough Whisperer. It was sent to me by our friend Joe Fugari at Tutta Bella Pizza in Seattle, one of the Seattle's famous pizzerias, wood fire pizzerias. And he sent this to me, and I love it. Dough Whisperer. So now I walk out proudly, and maybe that could be instead of being Meathead, I'll be Dough Whisperer.
Well, if I don't know if this is going to show, but my business card says, let's see if I can get it up here, Barbecue Whisperer.
Barbecue, but there you go. See, well, maybe we should start a Whisperers Club. So, as a fellow whisperer, you mentioned that trying to figure out how to grill pizza on the bar. Now, some of us have been to the famous restaurant in Providence, Al Forno, which is known for grilled pizza. But you told me earlier that grilled pizza is really different from pizza on the grill. How would you differentiate those?
Yeah, and that's again, I come at it without your expertise and background, but I wanted to differentiate between the two because in the barbecue and grilling world, the way most people had done pizza on the grill in the early days was like they do at Al Forno, and they were, of course, the great pioneers of pizza on the grill. And pizza on the grill versus grilled pizza. Pizza on the grill is where you make your dough, you roll it out, you oil it pretty good, and you throw it on the grill. You got to keep the heat down a little bit, and you toast it on one side. Then you flip it, top it, close the lid, and try to cook what's on top. And it comes in, and you slice it up, and it's delicious. And that's grilled pizza.
That's grilled pizza, yeah.
Pizza on the grill is when you make a real pizza. You roll out the dough in the kitchen. You top it. You put all your meats and cheeses and sauces on there. It goes on a peel, and then you cram it onto the grill, and it cooks simultaneously top and bottom, and as a normal pizza does.
Don't you usually have like a stone or something on the grill, as opposed to putting it right on the rack?
Yeah, and in the early days, we were cobbling together things. We were building little houses for the pizza. You'd put a stone down and put bricks on either side.
Oh, yeah. Right.
And then you put another stone over the top. You try to hang it over the back so the hot air would flow through. And we were all doing that. And on my Weber kettle, I had good luck by lifting I would put it in a metal pan, a thin metal pan, and lift it up on bricks so it was closer to the dome. Because as you know, as all your listeners know, the hardest thing about pizza on the grill or grilled pizza is getting the top and the bottom cooked at the same time. I call it simultaneous pizza-gasm. Either you burn the bottom and the top is undercooked, or you burn the top and the bottom is undercooked.
Right. And that's where the mastery comes in. Can you make it happen at the same time? What did you call it? A pizza-gasm?
Yeah, simultaneous pizza-gasm.
Sure.
It's like in sex. You got to get it done at the same time.
That's the goal. So how do you do it? How do you make it happen?
Well, I think you do it by the Braille system, the same as you do with sex. You got to practice. Everybody's grill, or now all these incredible pizza ovens that are on the market, you still have to dial them in. And, a slight difference in your dough and everything is off. You put a few extra scoops of sauce on top and everything is off.
Right.
And you don't want to serve raw sausage. You've got to get the sausage cooked. Pepperoni is less of a problem. So, it is, I think, far more intricate and far more of an art than barbecue.
Well, it's interesting because, as you said, the little tricks like raising the pan closer to the dome of your grill is a trick. Now, what about the difference between doing it on a like a propane grill versus a charcoal grill?
Yeah.
And how do you? So let's just focus on the charcoal side. If you're going to be doing a charcoal grilled pizza, or either way, grilled or barbecue on the grill, how intense should those coals be And how do you set that?
All right. Well, again, it can really vary depending on your doughs and toppings, but my typical setup on a plain old Weber kettle, which you can still buy for $130.
And that's how I first made my first pizza on a Weber. Yeah.
I make a ring of hot coals around the rim. I put a few coals in the center to make sure that the dough cooks in the middle. But if you spread the coals out over the bottom, you're almost certainly going to burn the bottom of the crust. So I put them around the edge so that most of the heat comes up around the dome and it flows around with a convection air pattern. And I, as I say, I scatter a few under the center, but not many. And you got to play with it, because if you've got oil in your dough, it's going to behave differently than if you have a straight Neapolitan dough that has no oil in it. Then I stack bricks on the cooking grate. And I almost always do it on a metal pan, a thin metal pan. It can be a regular a rectangular sheet pan. My wife has these round ones that she learned to grill on. She's Italian American, and she's used those in her indoor oven for years. But I raise it up to get it closer to the dome in order to make sure the top cooks.
Get that hot heat rises to the top, obviously, and then bounces back down from the dome.
And anybody who's watched a real pizzaiola knows that they start the pie on the floor of the pizza oven. But often, as they check the bottom's done, and they don't think the top is, they raise it up on the peel. They hold it right up next to because a good pizza oven has that flame licking across the top.
Right. So they call it doming the pizza. So they lift it into the dome, and then that intense heat, like in 5 seconds of doming, you can just char the whole top. Yeah. So, but that would be pizza on the grill. If you were doing grilled pizza and putting the dough directly on the grate, same system, the coals around the outside.
Yeah, although I do that on my gas grill. It's easier to control the temperature on the gas grill than on the charcoal grill.
Yeah.
And you're really just toasting it. That's the whole thing. There's all this obsession over wood burning pizza ovens. I don't know if I want my pizza smoky. I don't think that that's a necessity. I think that, in fact, the greatest pizzas I've ever had don't have the smoke flavor. So the whole idea of, the early unis came out with, they were pellet burners because they were trying to imitate your downtown wood burning pizza oven. But, those things cook in 90 seconds to 2 minutes. You're not going to get any smoke flavor. And I don't think you want smoke flavor. So I've gone, my uni is straight propane. I've got also a rock box. I've had several different makes and manufacturers.
Well, it's one of the perks of being in your side of this thing, of being a repository of knowledge, is you probably get to test almost every tool that comes out.
Well, in fact, there are so many out there. I've hired a friend of ours, David Joachim. You know David.
Oh, yeah, David, yeah. Isn't he one of your editors on your site?
He was our full-time editor. Somebody wooed him away to a faux meat company, one of these. He's now at a health food company.
Wow, he's also like cranking out books like crazy. He's a prolific
pizza aficionado. He's written books about pizza, and we've just hired him to test pizza ovens for us because it's too much for me. I didn't mind it when there were only 2 or 3 out there, but I can't keep up with it. So he's getting paid now to test pizza ovens. Isn't that cool?
That is cool. And that, as you mentioned, this proliferation of new ovens for home cooks to make pizza, whether it's the Rockbox and Uni, which really were game changers for the industry, and then the old guard. For instance, our good friends at Forno Bravo have different levels of both professional and home versions, and then there's like all these plugins. I've got one now, the Italia, and then there's the Breville Pizzaiolo. You just plug them in, and I mean, it's amazing what's available if you're willing to make one pizza at a time. Those are great tools.
And with the advent of David now testing for us, we have maybe a dozen or so. We review product. We review grills and smokers and now pizza ovens, and we have reviews on our website. And we'll have more with David.
So actually, some of those ovens are already posted and published.
Oh yeah.
People should just go to AmazingRibs.com. That to go to AmazingRibs.com, that's a free resource, right? Do they have to register or become a member to go?
No. We have two sections. There's 2,000 pages of, including hundreds of reviews of over 500 grill, smoker, and pizza oven reviews, about 200 thermometer reviews. All of that's free. But we do have a membership portion called the Pitmaster Club, which is where the members are trading recipes and tips. A lot of really great creativity. And oh my goodness, with these new phones, the photography is just breathtaking. I mean, it's magazine quality. You know,
it's like your own private Instagram in a way.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. And
I think that club is so cool because in addition to these added perks of communication and community, there's occasionally a gathering, a trip, maybe with you, meetups and things like that. So
yeah, there's been we tried to do a formal one in Memphis. We had 400 people pay to come to Memphis and spend a whole week with us, or not a whole week, 3 or 4 days. And COVID got in the way, so we had to cancel that. But the members have been putting together. There was one in North Carolina a few weeks ago, and a couple in Texas. We'll have one here in Chicago. They just get together and let's go out, somebody's backyard and cook.
Well, so now that we kind of moved into the Pitmasters and Amazing Ribs, and let's take a little break. When we come back, let's focus on grilling and barbecue and tap your brain a little bit to share with us maybe the 10 most popular myths about barbecue and grilling and some other little tricks. I want to get maybe the tricks of the trade that you can share with our listeners, because for many people, the focus has been on pizza, but now let's bring them up to speed on grilling.
You know what? It's all outdoor cooking.
Exactly. Beautiful. We're with Meathead Goldwyn. You're on Pizza Quest. Come back after the break for part 2. This episode of Pizza Quest is brought to you by Central Milling, hand-selected grain, expertly milled for passionate bakers. Central Milling is the farmer, the miller, and the baker working together to preserve American farmland for tomorrow while providing the highest quality flour and grains for the bakers of today. Dating back over 150 years, Central Milling is built on generations of knowledge, and they know that premium flour starts at the source. Employee-owned, Central Milling works directly with their farmers to sustainably grow grains that have exceptional flavor, nutrient content, color, and baking performance, which results in one of the largest selections of premium specialty flour and grains in the country. Hand-selected for the highest baking qualities, milled, cracked, or blended slowly to minimize heat generation, then bake-tested for performance. Learn more about Central Milling and their products at centralmilling.com. Welcome back to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and I'm here with Meathead Goldwyn. We're having a fun conversation. Started with a little bit of pizza, as usual. This is Pizza Quest, but Pizza Quest and AmazingRibs.com quest, so to speak, it's all the same quest. Well, I say it's more about the quest than it is about the pizza. It's more than about the ribs. But let's talk about AmazingRibs.com and the knowledge that you've accumulated and have shared with hundreds of thousands of people over the years. As you mentioned in part 1, Meathead, this is the largest resource, largest community of what would you call it? Barbecue and grilling freaks, the community, the tribe.
And pizza.
Yeah,
and it's millions. We have we average 2 to 3 million visitors a month.
That's pretty astounding in its own right. So I have a couple questions for you, though, now that we've got you, and I want to capture some of that. I know I've heard you talk about the idea that there are common myths about barbecue and grilling that people have. Can you share some of the top 10 or so?
Yeah, it's a lot different than pizza. Pizza, you have to go out and acquire knowledge. You got to buy a Pizza Reinhardt, Pizza Reinhardt. There you go, Peter Reinhardt book, and you got to learn about the complications and the complexity of pizza. Barbecue, we just go out there and fire up the grill because Dad taught us how to do it.
Right.
And, or mom.
And if you're a guy, you wouldn't admit it if you didn't know what you were doing anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. They'll take your man card away. And it's funny, there's another topic. but our membership is 80% male. The barbecue manufacturers will tell you. Now that's slightly changing, and there's a few reasons why, and we can get into that later. But in any case, I learned to grill from my dad, and he learned from his dad, and it gets passed down often from father to son. And the things we have now learned, most of them are wrong.
That's
that's
the crux
because
of the matter here.
that's because there's a lot of folklore, and we now understand science a lot better. I did my master's in art, and I think there's a parallel here. In the art world, you have these movements, you have the impressionists, the post-impressionists, the fauvists, the modernists, and so on. Well, we're now in the culinary art world where the nerdists have taken over. Yeah. And you're one of them. And anybody who's watched Alton Brown knows he's one of them.
Right.
Kenji Lopez-Alt is one. Christopher Kimball is. Our great godfather is Harold McGee. But the nerdists are the cooks among us who are different from. Well, you teach at Johnson & Wales. You teach at a great culinary institution. I taught at Le Cordon Bleu, and most of the professors there learned from the traditional classic French chefs. And a lot of what they've learned is wrong. It's what's been passed down. Now, I mean, look, the French know how to cook. They know how to cook better than I do. The Chinese know how to cook. But a lot of us now have learned a great deal about the science of cooking and what happens. Because when you step foot into the kitchen or onto the grill, you're doing a physics and a chemistry experiment. And if you understand some of the physics and chemistry, which I go to great lengths to explore on AmazingRibs.com.
And also in your book. Your book is loaded with great.
Yeah, the book is two halves. The first half is text. It's a science book. And the second half, and hopefully I convey it in lay terms, the second half is recipes that demonstrate the science. But there's so much science involved. I mean, at the very core basics, I can't tell you how many barbecue people I meet who don't use thermometers. Now, this is the simplest, easiest technology on the face of the earth. This is the year 2023. A digital thermometer that will tell you precisely the temperature of that steak in 5 seconds or less. You'll never waste money on an overcooked steak. How many of your listeners here, raise your hand, have gone out and served a steak dinner and people cut into it and it's overcooked and you just have to stand there at the head of the table and go, it kind of got away from me. I went to get a beer and, look at.
Or it's undercooked. People
or it's undercooked.
Medium rare and it comes.
That's worse. Yeah. Undercooked chicken can send grandma to the hospital.
There you go.
A medium rare steak. And we know because of science, they have a gadget called the Warner-Brachler machine, which is an artificial tooth. And it presses up against the meat and it tells you how much pressure it takes to shear the surface. And they can measure the amount of moisture. We know in that range, 130 to 135 Fahrenheit is medium rare. And at that temperature, a steak is generally most delicate, most juicy, most flavorful. And so that's your target, 130 to 135. Poking it with your finger. They have websites that should know better. I've seen important culinary websites who won't go. I won't name, who keep telling you, you poke it with if your fist is open.
Right.
If your fist is open, that's medium rare.
Your thumb and your forefinger. Right.
Yeah. Or you touch your nose. I mean, for crying out loud! I'm a little overweight. My fist is different than my wife, who exercises. A sirloin steak feels different than a filet mignon, so you can't translate from one to the other. A digital thermometer, and you talk about myths. People complain. Well, it'll let all the juices out. No, an 8-ounce filet mignon. That's your typical filet mignon. Is 75% water. That's 6 ounces of water in a filet mignon. Stab it with a thermometer half a dozen times, and if you lose a half a teaspoon out of 6 ounces, you're never going to notice it. In fact, while it's cooking, it's going to lose 15 to 20% or more due to evaporation and drip loss. So don't worry. Poke it all you want. Get that filet mignon or that ribeye or whatever you cook to exactly the right temperature and have your guests enjoy the meal. So digital thermometers is the most important thing I can teach anyone who's getting serious about grilling. You'll never overcook or undercook. And we talked about undercooked chicken. Back in 2014, Consumer Reports bought 300 chicken breasts around the country, had them tested, and 90% had pathogenic bacteria. And of that 90%, half of them had antibiotic-resistant pathogens. Now, they all die if you cook them to a safe temperature, 160 to 165, nothing to worry about.
So in other words, you're going to get bacteria, whether you like it or not. Most of the time, you're going to buy stuff. And so, but if cooking is the real antidote, and the safety measure is cooking it properly.
Yeah, my wife is a PhD microbiologist, and she worked in food safety for the FDA. And she says the term that they use is cooking is the kill step.
The kill step.
Because there are many steps in food processing. Cooking is the kill step. Cooking kills. So you like medium rare hamburgers? They're risky because if there's contamination on the surface of the beef, which there usually is, when you grind it, it goes into the center. If it's on the surface of a steak and you cook it, it's pasteurized, it's safe. But it's in the center of a hamburger. How do you get a medium rare hamburger? Cooking is the kill step. Take yourself a chuck steak, which runs about 80% lean, 20% fat, and that's a nice ratio. Dunk it in boiling water for 20 seconds. You've now pasteurized the surface. It's safe. Grind it up, cook it medium rare. Perfect. Understand the science.
That's it.
So your mouth is open. You look like
this is a new piece of information to me because I never thought about the idea that if you dunk the meat before you grind it, and then and all that surface bacteria that you would have ground into the meat, you've killed it so that you've made it safe. I never even thought of that. And how long do you have to dip it in boiling water for?
Probably only 10 seconds, but I do it for 20 to be safe.
So it doesn't cook the meat; it just kills.
It'll cook the surface. The surface will get.
But that's going to get grounded.
But you're going to grind it up, and there's the ratio of surface to interior is so much more interior meat, especially if it's a thick cut. Because the problem is that when an animal is slaughtered, the whole process of slaughtering and gutting it and cleaning it almost always brings contamination to the surface of the meat. I mean, if you've got a steer hanging upside down and the guy gets his knife and slits open the guts and the guts spill out and land on the floor and it aerosolizes, or heaven forbid, they accidentally cut open the intestines and it gets on the knife or on their gloves or on the tables, you're going to get contamination almost always. If you run a test on a steak, it's almost always got some contamination. Now, a big problem is how much, and hopefully it's not much. But again, the minute you throw it on a grill or in a cast iron pan, it's pasteurized.
That is such a cool trick.
You've killed everything.
I love the dipping trick. That is, and then it's cool? That is very cool.
Well, most bacteria die. They start, and this is another thing that a lot of people don't understand. They start dying at about 131 Fahrenheit, which is medium rare.
Yeah.
They start dying at 131. So you can cook something like a burger at 131, but it takes a long time to pasteurize it because it's not just temperature, it's temperature and time. And of course, this is something that the sous vide people understand. So you can cook a steak or a chicken at a low temperature over 131 and kill all bacteria, but it takes hours.
That's why that long immersion in the circulators is important. Aside from tenderizing, yeah.
If you love hollandaise sauce, you can make pasteurized eggs at home if you have a sous vide machine. Just drop the eggs into the sous vide bath. I think the temperature is 145. I got to look it up. About 140. There's one. The whites harden at one temperature and the yolks harden at a different temperature.
Right.
I think it's 145. Somebody really needs to know. Drop me an email, meathead@amazingribs.com, or wait for my next book. It'll be in there. But
Yeah, wait, before you don't leave that, you're working on a new book. I know that when I on your site, you have a number of books already out that I don't even know about, right? You have books on specific chickens or
well, I've done a bunch of ebooks.
they're ebooks, okay, but
They're short and focused.
Okay.
I've done chicken, turkey, steak.
Yeah.
I've got a good one on sous vide Q. I call it sous vide Q because you start sous vide, and if you've done sous vide, it comes out of the bag, it's ugly. But if you throw it on the barbecue or the grill or the smoker, you can get beautiful flavors and color. And that's my Maillard reaction. So I've got one on sous vide Q and steak and chicken and turkey and brisket. And they're all ebooks. They're $3.99 on Amazon or Apple. And if you join our Pitmaster Club, you get them for free.
Oh, there you go. So another perk for being part of the.
Yeah, and in fact, if you buy one of our rubs and sauces, there's a QR code, and you can download one of the ebooks for free too. So
just before we forget, I'll say it one more time for folks to write this down. If you want to be in the Pitmasters Club, it only costs what a year?
It's $34.95.
So for $35, you can join the Pitmasters and get a lot of perks, including a whole bunch of books that would have cost way more than $35.
Yeah.
So all this knowledge comes your way.
We did the math. I think there's like $76 worth of freebies. Plus this is
wait, there's more.
This is cool. We had a bunch of manufacturers offer discounts to our members, so that's very cool.
All right, so that's sort of the public service announcement part of it. Before we run out of time, I want to run through real quick a few more myths with you. So let me ask you a couple other things. That was a keeper right there.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me, what do I need to know about beer can chicken? Is it a thing? Is it over? Is it real? Is there a value to it? What?
Well, first of all, before I break the hearts of all the beer can chicken lovers out there, let me tell you that your beer can chicken is wonderful. And the reason it's wonderful is it's roast chicken.
It's roast chicken.
Roast chicken is always wonderful. God Almighty, whether you're cooking indoors, outdoors, or whatever, it's roast chicken. It's fantastic. But the beer can has nothing to do with it. Beer can
does the beer have anything to do with it? Does the beer itself, or can it be water in the can?
Well, first of all, let's talk about it. Chicken is done at 160 to 165. What temperature does beer evaporate at? 212. It's water. Yeah. It's mostly water. So the beer is not going to evaporate. You can stick it up that chicken's butt all you want, and unless you immolate that chicken all the way up to 200 degrees, at which point it'll be black, there's no beer evaporating. And you've stuck it up the butt of the chicken, so the top of the can is exposed only to a very small amount of area in the shoulders of the top of the chicken. And even if there was any evaporation, it would only touch a small area of the chicken. Now, there's no interstate highways inside of a chicken that run from the shoulders down to the breast, down to the drumsticks. You can't get that fluid down through. It just doesn't go anywhere. In fact, the chicken is fully saturated. It's loaded with water. There's no room in there for beer. You could take that chicken and put it in a vat of beer overnight, and it might gain 2 to 3% of weight because it's fully saturated. It's like a sponge. The beer can't get in. And then who on earth wants their chicken to taste bitter like beer? Yeah, why would you want to do that? Chicken. And so the other thing is you've got a metal can. There's no way for the beer to go sideways through the sides of the metal can. So it just doesn't work. And what is the best flavors that we develop on the grill or in the oven? The brown flavors. It's caused by a chemical reaction called the Maillard reaction.
Yeah.
And you brown the outside of the chicken, but you're not browning the cavity when you got a beer can in there.
I was going to ask about that because it almost acts like an impediment.
Yes, it's like putting a condom in there. Now, if you take the chicken and cut it open and spatchcock it or butterfly it, or break it into 8 parts, now you can brown it on all sides. And if you do, it cooks faster. And if it cooks faster, there's less moisture loss.
There you go.
So, I mean, I don't do a whole chicken anymore. Sometimes I'll do a rotisserie chicken, but most of the time I break it up because thigh meat and drumsticks are brown meat, and dark meat is best at around 170, and breast meat is around 160. So if you break it up and you have a good digital thermometer,
Yeah.
By the way, we have an electrical engineer who tests digital thermometers on AmazingRibs.com, and we don't sell anything. We don't sell any thermometers, grills, or anything. All our product testing, we just tell you where to go to buy it. But those thermometers, now you can test the breasts and the thighs and take them off when they're optimum temperature, and brown them on all sides, cook them faster. It's just far superior to the beer can chicken. But it does. Beer can chicken does look cool.
It is cool. It's fun. I think it's a great gathering point. And when it first came out and became a thing, it was a great conversation starter. But right from the beginning, I'm thinking, before I even knew anything about food science, I'm thinking, is this really work? Is this the best way to do it or not? But it is kind of cool to be able to stand them up like that. All right.
I mean, it looks like a little Buddha, and you can cross its leg.
Right. Yeah, you put on a show, a great puppet show. A couple other questions that I have, again, for people who the members, the long-term members who follow you, know the answers to a lot of these things. But for a lot of us who are still kind of rising in our knowledge base, what about, how important is a marinade, and what do marinades do, and what's a fat?
Really, boy, you're really getting to the core questions too. Again, remember, meats are about 75% water, and most meats are fully saturated. Unless they've been dried or dehydrated, there's no room for liquid in there.
Okay.
So you can soak meat in a marinade, and not much is getting in. Now, there are a couple of things. First of all, molecules are huge. Oil, meat is water, oil and water don't mix. So typically your marinades are a vinaigrette, which has oil in it. That oil can't get in. It's oil and water don't mix. Garlic, sugar, pepper, all these molecules are huge. They can't get in. There are cracks and crevices, microscopic cracks and crevices in the surface of meat. So they can get in there. But they don't go more than, say, a 1/16 of an inch. You can marinate a chicken breast overnight, grill it up, slice it open, and take a core sample, and you won't taste any marinade. It can't get down into the core sample. Now, it is a surface treatment, and it will flavor the surface. And so as you chew it, the flavor from the surface will mix with the center. But none of that stuff gets into the center of the meat. So those of you who take your Thanksgiving turkey and get a big beer cooler and fill it with apple juice, black pepper, garlic, onion powder, paprika, salt, and everything are wasting money. If you want those flavors on your turkey, sprinkle it on. Just take the jar and sprinkle it on. Now, there's one exception, and that's salt. Okay. Salt is the magic rock. Salt is different than anything else in your pantry. Salt is just 2 atoms, sodium and chloride. Sugar is 23 atoms and more.
Right.
God knows what's in garlic. They can't get in. But salt, when it gets wet, and it does get wet on the surface of the meat, it gets an electrical charge called ionization, and it can actually penetrate, and it can go deep. It can go to the center. It's slow. It takes time. So if you've got a 2-inch thick steak, it might take 2 or 3 hours if you salt it for the salt to get to the center. Once it gets to the center, though, it starts doing some cool stuff. Salt actually alters the shapes of proteins, and it actually makes protein hold on to moisture better. And the other cool thing about salt is it amplifies flavor, and it amplifies it without altering it. Garlic alters the flavor, but salt just turns up the dial to 11, and it helps hold on to moisture. So you do want to salt. Now, you don't need much. Our rule of thumb is half a teaspoon of Morton's coarse kosher salt per pound of meat. And I use Morton's coarse kosher salt not because they paid me. They didn't pay me a penny. It's just that we wanted all of our recipes to have the same salt. So all of our recipes are standardized on Morton's coarse. And one of the reasons we did that, because it's easy to grab it and pinch it with your fingers and sprinkle it. And because there's no additives in it.
So the coarse, and because it's coarse salt, it's not as concentrated as if it was table salt.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's about table salt is about 50% more roughly salinity than kosher salt, Morton's kosher salt. And there's a difference between Morton's kosher salt and Diamond kosher salt. And we have a table on AmazingRibs.com that gives you the formulas to translate. So if you've encountered a recipe that says use Diamond kosher salt and all you have is Morton's, you can do a translation from the table.
You can adjust accordingly. Yeah.
But salt's the magic rock. And salt
this raises a question, though. It sounds like from what I'm taking away from what you just said is I'd be better off, for instance, for my turkey, doing a salt rub than a brine.
Yeah.
Is that true?
We call it dry brine.
A dry brine.
I'm pretty sure I'm the one who coined the term dry brine years ago because everybody was dunking it in a bucket full of liquid. All you need to do is the night before, because there's a lot, turkey breasts are thick and it takes a while for the salt to get in the center, is just get your salt out, whatever type of salt you want, and sprinkle it on. Sprinkle it heavier on the breasts, less on the drumstick and wings. Sprinkle it on just like you might at the table side. I like a half a teaspoon per pound ratio. And then pop it in the fridge, and it will do its magic.
It will, and just overnight's enough time for it to penetrate before you pop it in the oven the next day. And that'll be as more effective than, or as effective as any kind of wet cooking it in. Interesting. But if the salt, as it's penetrating, if you also put, let's just say we're going with the brine approach, and there's pepper and other herbs and spices in there, does it carry those into the meat with it?
Nope.
Well, that's
they stay on the surface. They stay on the surface, which is fine. I mean, you want to flavor the surface.
It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't do what you think it's doing.
And if you follow the same technique I was saying about the chicken, if you break it into parts, now you can season the underside.
Yeah.
You get the skin on one side, and you have bare flesh on the other side. You can season both sides nice and neatly. You get lots of flavor. It's on the surface. It doesn't penetrate, but as you chew, it mixes in your mouth.
If you salt the chicken or the turkey with the skin on, will the salt penetrate through the skin and get to the meat?
Yes, it's a little slower because the skin has got a lot of fat in it.
Okay,
so it takes a little longer for it to get through the skin than it does through the flesh, but it goes in.
That's a really, I think really amazing piece of information. A great takeaway from
salt
today.
Is magic, and I've written a great deal about it. If you go to AmazingRibs.com, there's maybe 5 or 6 articles about the different kinds of salt and how salt is manufactured and how to use different kinds of salt. Because salt is fun to put on the table too. Salt is the magic rock, and I know a lot of us are concerned about our salt consumption for health reasons. But if you're using it in the ratio I mentioned, half a teaspoon per pound, it's not as much as you're going to get at McDonald's or any kind of restaurant. Most restaurants know this. I mean,
and if you undersalt,
they use a lot of salt.
If you don't pre-season it, then when you go to eat it, you're going to end up putting a whole bunch of salt on at the last second and get more salt.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we run out, I want to get a couple more in. What is a fat cap, and what does it do, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah. I mean, if you buy a pork loin, it almost always comes with a layer of fat on top. You have fat all over an animal. You, as a human, have fat. We are animals. Chickens, pork, beef. There's different kinds of fat. There's fat that lays on the surface. Usually that's between the skin and the muscle. Or fat that is woven throughout the meat, and we call that marbling.
Right.
Now, the fat that's within the meat, think of a nice, juicy ribeye steak, and it has this lattice work, this beautiful slivers, layers of fat throughout. Fat is flavorful and it carries flavor. So inside the muscle, it will melt and it will add flavor, tremendous flavor. It's essential. That's why we want USDA Prime, because it has more marbling than USDA Choice.
Mm-hmm.
And Wagyu, which has more marbling than USDA Prime.
Right.
But many pieces of meat, particularly things like a beef brisket, can have almost an inch of fat on top.
Yeah.
Now, remember, meat is 75% water, fat is oil, oil and water don't mix. Right. You leave that fat cap on there, it is not, under any circumstances, in any way, not on this planet or anywhere else, going to get into the meat. It's going to melt maybe in the cooking process, some of it, and it's going to run off.
Uh-huh.
Now, some of that will drip onto the coals, and it will vaporize up, and it might add some flavor to the surface. But most of the time, when you put the fat cap on there, and brisket cooks do this all the time, they leave a fat cap on there, they put their rub all over it, and they slice it and they serve it. And what's the first thing the guests do? They cut all that fat off. Nobody wants to eat a half-inch layer of fat. There goes the rub. When you're doing a brisket or a pork butt, if there's a big, thick fat cap, get rid of most of it. Leave at most an eighth to a quarter of an inch. Then during the cooking process, that will shrink down, and people will eat a very thin sliver of fat on top of the muscle. But if you leave a big, thick fat layer, they're going to cut it off. And then you can put your rub and your seasonings onto the meat, and you can get more flavor that way. So fat caps got to go.
All right, that's a good one. Now, for people who are doing, quote, barbecue style cooking, smoking on their grills and things like that, there's a lot of myths about the wood, soaking the wood. What's the best way to create smoke? And is it important to soak your wood before you start?
all the books, and so many, and it's still. I mean, I watched the Food Network. They all tell you to soak the wood for a couple of hours. Folks, there's a reason they build boats out of wood, because it doesn't absorb water. I got news for you. And we've done the tests, and you can see pictures of this on the website. I've taken wood chunks the size of my fist, wood chips the size of my thumbnail, raw wood, lumber from the lumberyard, soak them, not just for an hour, but overnight. Weigh them before, weigh them after. 3% weight gain at the most. And that's only on the surface. You cut it open, and it is bone dry inside.
What if you put salt in the water?
Because it's dry.
It's not a marinade.
So it just doesn't get in. It just cannot get in. Now, you take some wet wood that's got water on the surface, and you got a charcoal grill, and you've got the grill coals. You got the coals lit, and they've all covered over with white ashes when they're at their best. And you dump them onto the grill, and now you throw wet wood on top. What happens to the temperature?
Ooh, drops,
You just dumped your temperature. You want to get to a temperature and be consistent, just like you are indoors. You want an even, steady temperature as best you can. And then people say, well, I throw the wet wood on the grill, and it just belches smoke. I got news for you. It's steam. It's not smoke.
I was just going to say,
Water converts to steam at 212 degrees. Wood converts to smoke at 500 degrees. Wood cannot begin to smoke until it gets up to 500 degrees. And it can't get to 500 degrees until the water that's on the surface evaporates. So you throw wet wood on the fire, and it stops. It doesn't smoke. It can't smoke until all the water evaporates. Then it can go up to 500, and then it can start smoking. So it's not smoke.
Well,
don't need to soak your wood. And in fact, we know that the best flavor you get, and here's another one. People say, well, I throw wood onto the fire and it catches on fire, and I want it to smoke. You want it to catch on fire. When it catches on fire, that yellow and blue flame, consuming impurities that have funny flavors. And if you can get wood to burn with a flame, you're going to get smoke that has the best flavor. And you're going to say, but I don't see any smoke. That's because it's what we call blue smoke. The particles are so small that they don't refract light, but they have the best flavor. And so you want your wood to actually catch fire and burn to get the best flavor. Now, you'll use more wood, but wood is cheap.
This is amazing. So basically, you've just given us a master class of golden nuggets, and I'm sure there are many more that we haven't even touched on. Right in the book, in the book Meathead: The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, but also for free. The gateway drug into the book is AmazingRibs.com, where everybody can get this knowledge for free. I know that I've used the index there and the search engines to ask specific questions. It's a phenomenal resource. And Meathead, thanks for debunking a lot of our misconceptions, conventional wisdom debunked and replaced with solid sort of scientific fact, but also culinary craft. And it sounds like that's what's driving you, is to bring those two worlds together.
We get a lot of letters from readers, and most of them read something like this: "You changed my life." and it
makes it worth it, doesn't it?
When I was in high school and college, I thought, I'm going to change the world. I'm going to become an important politician or a doctor. And I had no idea that I would change the world by teaching people how to grill. But it's really happened. I get letters from people saying, when I came home from work today, the kid said, "Mom, can Dad cook?" That is so cool.
That's great. That's great.
And feeding people is an act of love. And this. I mean, you put a piping hot pizza in front of somebody and they're just happy and they love you for it. And, if anybody who has not learned to cook owes it to themselves and the people they love to learn how to cook. It isn't hard. Peter will teach you and I'll teach you.
Well, Meathead, thank you so much. It's been fun as always. It's like it always ends up at the end of our conversations with sort of love becomes the real theme of our conversations.
Hugs.
Yeah. So I look forward to seeing you in person next time we can be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
But also, I know you and I've talked about we'll continue our own conversations privately. Those of you who are listening, let your friends know, number one, to tune in and they can pick up a master course in a short amount of time, but also get to the website, get to amazingribs.com is both would you say both a website and a newsletter, or how would you define?
Well, there's the Pitmaster Club is a separate partition, it's a paywall, but it's an interactive environment. A website is, I send you information, you see it, you read it, you can ask a question, but it's not really interactive. The Pitmaster Club is very interactive. It's members talking to each other back and forth, what we used to call message boards. And you can take a 30-day free trial.
Well, if you've got the fire in your belly that we're hearing, in this conversation today, for me to join up. Otherwise, just jump on and check it out yourself. Check out amazingribs.com and also let your friends know.
Yeah, and there's pizza content in there. It's not up to your level, but there's a lot of our members are serious about pizza.
Well, we always say it's as much about the quest and the journey as it is about the final product, and I think that we're on this parallel paths in that regard.
Yeah, we're brothers.
All right. Well, Meathead, thank you again for joining us. Thank all of you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Pizza Quest.
Pizza Quest is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.